Hello, and welcome to today's webisode of Consulting Corner. My name is Lauren Roberts, and I'm the Director of Agency Consulting here at Kite Technology Group. All too often, I hear from both accounting and account managers that there are several issues with transactions. Account managers, of course, get tired of being told, hey, you need to go fix your transaction, and I'm sure accounting probably has the same complaint. So today what I'm going to try to do is help you to prevent some of those issues by making sure that information is correct at the policy and line level of the policy in Epic. So I'm going to share my screen and go through some of those fields that are important to make sure we have corrected in Epic. So the first screen you want to start on, making sure that you have information correct, is going to be the account detail. Now, generally, you're going to enter and update this information when you're adding an account in Epic, and you can certainly go to user options and field defaults to make sure that your structure defaults in each time. However, if you're entering that information manually, you'll want to be sure to select the correct agency and branch that you will be entering this policy for. This information will pull specific information from things like commission agreements for both the agency and producer. Next, we're going to go into the policy screen, and we're going to open up the policy, and I've got here a package for us to review. So the next area that's going to be really important is going to be the policy status right here. The reason why our policy status is so important is because policy status is very important criteria in, again, a producer broker commission agreement or an agency commission agreement. Most often those agreements are created in the background by admin, and they are created so that when you enter in a policy, that policy pulls the correct producer commission agreement or broker commission agreement, as well as the correct agency commission agreement if your agency has entered that information in the system. So for example, if you enter in a policy and you put it in as new, but it really should have been a rewrite policy, when you pull in a producer on the PRBR tab, you're going to get the wrong commission agreement because you put the policy status in as new, and the producer's commission agreement is set up to pull in that new commission because of that status. So very important that we have that status correct anytime we're entering agency or entering new policies in the system. Next area you want to make sure you get correct is going to be this little radio button right here. Of course, when we're entering agency bill transactions, we want the policy to be agency bill. Otherwise, when accounting goes to select the transaction that you've entered, they are not going to be able to find that transaction. The only way they can pull in transactions to pay is if you enter the transaction correctly as an agency bill transaction. So keep that in mind. The next spot you want to check is going to be your profit center. Additionally, we can go back over to the policy, and I want to point out that the agency branch and department are very important here as well, because if your agency has set up producer broker commission agreements with any of that criteria or agency commission agreements with that criteria, they will not pull that information correctly if you don't have this also correct in the system. This is another option in user options and field defaults through your configure menu. So if you want to set defaults for that information, you can plug that in here as well. Back over on the line level, here we want to also make sure we have our premium payable entity correct. Now, this comes into play when, again, accounting is looking for a transaction that you've asked them to pay, or maybe they're paying an agency statement. They're looking specifically at a carrier. So when over in General Ledger, they're looking at just a specific list of transactions for that carrier. They can't see all transactions when they are entering in an agency statement or agency bill invoice that needs to be paid. They can only see what's entered for that specific PPE, whether it be a carrier or a broker. So if we don't have the right PPE in there, maybe we put in selective instead of travelers, when your accounting person goes to look for travelers transactions, your transaction's not going to be listed there. So very important that we have that correct before we get that invoice over to accounting to get paid. Also note that you do have two different lists here. You have broker and you do have carrier. So you will get a different selection from going to broker versus carrier. The next thing that we want to make sure that is correct in order to get correct transactions is our agency line commission. Now, this information could possibly vary from one line to another with certain carriers. So you want to be mindful of that. But in a lot of cases, we're just going to have one percentage listed for the policy, especially for some of those brokers and NGAs that are out there. So here we can do one of two things. If you select the Views Commission Agreement box, there is something that pulls in there. That means that your agency has created those agency commission agreements in the background. They've looked at what your commission should be with that specific broker or carrier, and they've entered in an agreement based on things like that policy status, as well as the policy type. So in some cases, you may be able to pull that in. However, every agency bill invoice is going to have the specific percentage that should be paid to the agency. So once you get that agency bill invoice, and you'll need that in order to transact the correct amount, you'll want to make sure that you enter that percentage in on this screen. So for now, I'm just going to click on that 15 and tab over to update that information. Now, not related to transactions, but very related to accounting and reporting is the estimated premium and commission fields. If your agency is reporting on these fields, you would want to make sure that this is updated at the first line level of the policy. Now, don't forget you have a little shortcut over here on the right-hand side called Apply to All Lines. So once you've added this information in and you know it's all correct, go ahead and click that Apply to All Lines option. And when you do that, you don't have to go to each line of the coverage to update that information. Epic's just going to send it across the board for you. And we can do that both at the line of business area as well as the line commission area. The next really important option to review is going to be your PRBR commissions tab. If we don't have a producer listed here, no producer will be paid. We always want to make sure that we have at least a producer that is the appropriate producer on the account, or we have just a house account if your agency has that set up. So in this case, we do have a producer, so that's great. But you'll notice that if we go to add a producer, and I pull in their name as the producer on this account, if they have a commission agreement set up, then that commission agreement, based on the policy type, the policy status, and possibly structure information, is going to pull in based on all of that criteria. So this commission agreement was already set up to come in based on information we entered in over at the line level. In some cases, you might have a split producer commission that's listed here. And if you do, then you may have a drop down of additional agreements that are available here. But otherwise, you should generally get the correct producer agreement to pull in based on that other criteria on the account. Of course, you have your little checkbox here, or sorry, your little shortcut here as well. So apply to all lines. Make sure you do that for your producer as well, because you'll need to have that on all lines of the policy. Now, your agency may have set up the utility that requires you to enter a producer or broker on the account. So sometimes Epic will take you right to this screen before you can really do anything else when you're adding a new policy. But you do want to make sure that you review this information before you enter a transaction. And if your agency does have that requirement, I would highly recommend always go to the producer broker screen first and get that information up to date. Now, if any of this information is incorrect or inaccurate when you're entering a transaction in the system, you'll always want to make sure that you come back to this policy and correct it first before you continue in your process. Because if you enter in a transaction, and we're going to just go through a quick transaction screen here. I'm going to go with this new business line. If you enter a transaction and it has the wrong agency commission, what's going to happen is when your accounting person goes in to pay that transaction to the carrier, they're going to look at the invoice that says they owe one amount, but your transaction says you owe a different amount. So we're going to have a conflict there. Accounting is going to have to reach out to you, and they're going to have to get you to correct that information, or they're going to spend extra time correcting that information. Also, if we don't have the correct agency commission, we're also not going to get the correct producer commission. So we want to make sure that that information is also correct. If you don't see a producer here when you come to the transaction, you will also want to make sure you go back to the policy and cancel this out. Go fix it on the policy before you go any further in the transaction process. Now, the reason why we do that is because none of this information in this transaction screen, even though some of it can be updated, it cannot write back to the policy. So the next time you do a transaction, it's going to be wrong again, and you're going to get the nasty gram again from accounting. So definitely want to make sure that everything is correct here. You have this chance to review and make sure that it's accurate before you close out the transaction and generate your invoice. So definitely want to make sure that all of those fields are complete over on the policy screen. That's going to prevent all of your headaches, and make sure that when you get the transaction in, send all your stuff over to accounting. They're going to give you a high five and say, thanks for doing it the right way. So keep an eye out on those policy screens. Make sure that you get the information in correctly the first time, and bye-bye nasty grams. All right. Thanks so much for joining me today for Consulting Corner, and look forward to seeing you next time.